or should you even start up, is a question that I think all entrepreneurs and founders have gone through before they started up. And I've gone through it. In fact, I've gone through it twice because I today run my second startup. So I've gone through this question twice in my life so far. And for those of you who are on the anvil of becoming, desiring to become an entrepreneur or thinking of quitting your job at some point in time in the future and thinking of becoming an entrepreneur, I think this question is going to haunt you for sure, or might already be haunting you. And I just want to kind of share my thoughts from my own personal experiences and the scores of other founder stories that I've either heard about or listened to or read about through books and podcasts and videos and all that. I kind of have distilled a pattern to what I've seen in terms of when founders start and when do startups really succeed when the founders started at the right time. So I just want to kind of share that with you because I thought this might be useful to you and you might avoid a lot of mistakes that other founders have done. In fact, you could avoid a mistake that I did with my first startup. That's what I thought, right? And here we go. So when do you start up? And before I get into the rigmarole of explaining the whole process, like to start, it'll be easier for me to kind of give you a visual of what I think on when you should start up. And for those who are the impatient lot, can probably see this diagram and stop the video then and there because the diagram kind of covers everything about it. So here it is. So this is my observation of the pattern on when you start up, right? You see that this is a workflow of 5 steps. You observe, identify, empathize, obsess, and then you start up, right? That's the pattern that I've seen of successful startups that have done it correctly, have gone through these 5 stages and have cleared certain milestones in these 5 stages before they start. And so, like I said, if you are one who's looking to start up, maybe you could probably apply this template to your own journey as well. So what do I? Let's go through one stage at a time and look at what it means to you, and I'll also relate from my personal experience of what I went through in those stages. So first is the observe stage, right? All of us are born observers, right? So we observe things, we find patterns in things that we see, and we assimilate things and we memorize things, right? And our brain is a very visual storage mechanism, so a lot of visuals get stored here, right? But all of us become also a little inert to certain things that we see, right? Because we've seen the same thing over and over again, that we become very inert to things and we stop observing the problems thereof, or we stop observing the challenges that are there in a particular situation in the world, right? Entrepreneurs are those people who observe that and who get attracted or who get motivated by that observation differently than the rest of the world, and that's what differentiates an entrepreneur and another person who sees the same problem, right? So in my case, I saw loss upon loss through first was through the Chennai tsunami that happened way back. Then floods that happened this decade, and the Varada storm that happened this decade. So all of these things kind of started to make me think about this. While everybody, including my family members, were all worried about the personal losses that were happening due to these natural calamities, my mind was more interested in understanding how are businesses surviving through these challenges, how are businesses coping up with these catastrophes, right? And I started to dig further and further into it to figure out what's really happening to businesses and how are they coping up with this challenge, right? So that's the observation that kind of triggered me in the first stage of my startup, right? So once you've seen that observation and you kind of see this particular situation in a different light than everybody else in the world, you transition into the identify stage, right? So you've seen something different, something bothers you. Now that it's bothering you enough for you to kind of start getting into the bottom of the problem. You start to identify the root cause of the problem. So that's when you kind of get from the observation stage to the identify stage. And observation stage may not happen once, right? So for example, in my own situation, I saw the tsunami. That time I was intrigued. Then the Chennai floods, I was intrigued. Only but when Varda happened, did I really start to look at this more seriously, and it started to make me a lot more interested to know how are businesses really coping up and what are they doing to kind of shield themselves from these catastrophes that keep hitting Chennai, right? So you don't generally go to the identify stage immediately. You might take some time as well, right? So once you're into the identify stage, you start to collect more facts around your observation, right? You start to invest more time of yours to identify what's really happening, what are people doing. You start to read blogs about it. You start to see videos about it. Uh, and you start to read the news, and suddenly these news articles kind of stand out from the newspaper for you, right? Or if you're subscribed to an app like Google News or to Flipboard or anything like that, then you suddenly start to see more and more news about this area because you've seen these things. So these apps start to recommend these to you, and you start to soak yourself in a lot of knowledge and information and facts around the problem and the observation that you've made. That's when you kind of really are into the identify space, right? And at some point in time, you start to associate yourself with the people who are going through this problem, right? So in my case, as part of the identify space, I was talking to a lot of business owners. I spoke to a lot of my colleagues at work, and started to discuss about this problem that SMBs are facing every year when these catastrophes are hitting them, and some of them are going out of business. So I took the courage to talk to some of the business owners also, right? And understand really what happened to them and why they had to suffer the loss that they had to suffer, and so on and so forth. Which is when I really was starting, as I spent more and more time in trying to identify this information and facts, is when I started to empathize with these business owners, right? I started to feel one of them, even though I didn't have a business myself. I started to feel one among them, right? And I was able to view the problem from their eyes or from their worldview, as I say, right? So, and this phase of empathizing is extremely, extremely important because you see everybody sees the problem in a particular way, right? And if you are thinking of building a solution for this problem, you must see the problem from the perspective of a potential buyer. Only then you will, number one, be able to know whether they also think this problem is worthwhile solving. Number two, do they see it worthwhile enough to pay you something for the solution that going to offer? And number three, what parts of the problem do they want to get solved first, right? What is high priority for them, right? What is that that's giving them the sleepless nights, as they figuratively say, right? And only then you will be able to plan your startup and your product or your solution or your service accordingly, right? So empathizing is extremely, extremely important in my opinion. And if you don't do that correctly, you might end up doing something really wrong, or you might prioritize something really wrong, and your startup journey might not go off to the right pace at the way at the pace at which you want it to go, right? So empathizing is really a critical part of the whole process that I've laid out here, right? And while you're doing this empathizing part, without even you realizing this, at some point in time, you will start to obsess with this problem. Let me pause it again and restate it again. Obsessing with the problem, right? Please note that I didn't mention solution or idea or product anywhere here, right? So you start to obsess with the problem that you have in front of you, right? Something these things don't. I mean, the problem is in the head so much that constantly you're thinking about this, constantly you're talking about this, constantly you're noting down something, or constantly you're reading about it and forming opinions about it, or talking to a lot of people about it, right? And a lot of times you might not know that you're actually in this stage till your family or your spouse or your friends kind of come up to you and tell you that, hey, why are you bothered about this so much, right? Why are you obsessing with this so much? Why are you always talking about this, right? Let's talk something different, right? Sometimes you get to know that you're obsessing with something only when some of the people around you kind of tell you about that, right? And the mistake that I did, in fact, even though I went through this obsess phase in my first startup and my second startup, the real mistake that I did with the first startup was I started to obsess with a solution, right? While I was empathizing, my brain was also parallelly working on a solution, and it came up with a solution, a technology solution to solve the problem. And by the time I came to this obsess phase, I was obsessed more with the solution than with the problem, right? So my priorities shifted, and my mind was thinking more of the solution. I was already thinking about how would the app look like, how would stakeholder A interact, how would stakeholder B interact, what will be the backend, what will be the technology they'll use, how will I wire all this up. So I was already obsessed with the solution, right? And at that point in time, I got disconnected from the problem, which is really the bad thing to do before you start up, right? You should never get disconnected from the problem. And even in fact, I would say even before you start up, you should never probably think about a solution in mind, right? Just keep an open mind, go into the world with the problem clearly in your head and all aspects of the problem clearly in your head, and then start to look for a solution rather than committing to the solution ahead of time. That's one of the mistakes that I did, and I would love to share that so that you don't end up making the same mistake. Right? But with my second startup, I was obsessed with a problem. Right? With GoFloaters, which is the current startup that I run, and GoFloaters is a pay-as-you-go on-demand office-based platform. Right? And with this, I was obsessed with a problem that I had in my mind as to how do you make uh, Office available on the tap? How do you make Office available wherever, whenever you go? How do you make Office as a utility and not be as a liability that it has become for many companies? So how do you change the definition of an office? So I was always constantly thinking about this problem space when I got into the obsess phase of my startup, second startup, right? And only when you have uh, gone through this obsess phase enough, and when your brain cannot take it any longer, right? You cannot hold the excitement of starting to solve this problem any longer, excuse me, is when you really, really start up, right? Till till your brain doesn't tell you that hey, this is enough, right? Enough of trying to think about this problem and trying to understand this problem better. Uh, i i and only I am equipped to go into the world and solve this problem, right? Till you get that kind of an urge from inside, I would recommend that you don't start up, right? Unless you're funded heavily and you can make mistakes after starting up, right? But if you're going to bootstrap your way through, wait till the point in time when your brain tells you, not others tell you. You're not motivated by others, but your own internal motivation, your own internal compass tells you that enough of trying to understand the problem any better. You have understood it really well, and you have the clear view of what the stakeholders want to get solved, and you see that there's some validation you've gotten from it, and then is when you really start up, right? And that is what happened in my second startup, right? I was obsessed with the problem. I was frustrated, and for in a lot of cases, if you are the person who was having the problem. So in my second startup, I had this problem. I had the problem of not having an office wherever I went to meet people, right? And I was going to the cafe coffee days and Starbucks and spending ₹1,000 in the coffees to just to get a space and half an hour of Wi-Fi so that I can get some emails across and all that. So this problem became so frustrating to me over a 6 month period that I wanted to solve this problem for myself. So I got extremely frustrated and said, "Hey, there's no solution this world is offering me. So let me just go ahead and solve this problem for myself, right?" So that's when I started my second startup, and I didn't have a solution in my mind. I just said I'm going to solve it, right? And I'm going to solve it for myself. So I did something very simple that I could get it off the ground in 2 days. And in fact, I started to get revenue from the third day onwards when my friends got to know about it and they wanted to use the service that I was building for myself, right? So that's how we start up, and that's how you are able to launch quickly, and that's how you know that you're ready to launch your startup and get commit yourself fully into it. And I feel this is the pattern that I've gone through, and I've also observed people like the founders of Uber, founders of Zomato, and founders of so many other startups that have gone through even Facebook, for example, right? If you see the movie, you would see that Mark kind of went through this kind of a phase, and but it happened in the movie makes it feel that it happened in over a night, but in reality, it might have happened over multiple days or multiple weeks. But you would really see that this is a common pattern that you would see across many founders who have started on their startup idea, is that they've gone through the cycle more or less. So I'm hoping that this is useful to you, and you find this applying to your entrepreneurial journey as well. I'd love to hear your feedback through the comments on the YouTube channel, or you could also ping me on LinkedIn. You can search for Shyam and GoFloaters on LinkedIn, and connect with me and share your thoughts on this video, or for the matter, anything else on your entrepreneurial journey that you want to share or ask me for any inputs from my side. So thank you. All the best with your entrepreneurial journeys, and we'll get back to you with more useful videos if I can put them through that from my own experience that might be of help to you. Thank you. Stay safe, and all the best with your entrepreneurial journeys. And do start up if you're thinking about one. Do start up, but only after you've obsessed enough with the problem. Take care.